How long do you all want to live?
100.
100? Anything else? Have you thought about that?
As long as there's quality of life.
That's one thought, isn't it? The quality of your life. So let me ask you to do something. You can just write there, just remember the details, what I'm going to ask you to do. But sometime do a little exercise. Write down on the top of the page just how old do you plan on living. Just write a number. And then go back to that, and on the page below that you're going to write how do you want to live at that time. Say if you want to live to your 98, and write down in that last year of your life, what do you want to be doing? You want to be walking around, you want to go traveling, you want to be meeting with friends, you want to socialize. What kind of activities do you want to do? And count back every 2 or 3 years, again, what do you want to do at that point? So 93, say 90, geez, okay, I want to be doing this. And 87 or 85, I want to be doing this. At 80, I want to be doing this. So count back. Now the second part of the quiz is think about where you are right now. How you feeling? What is your energy level? What are you doing? What's your activities? How do you feel? How are your joints working? How's your mind doing? How are you feeling? And then think back about 3 years ago and think about what you were doing 3 years ago. And then just draw that line. If you're going on the same trajectory, where are you going to be in 3 years? Are you going to make it to your end point feeling as good as you want to feel? See, what we're going to talk today about is anti-aging medicine. Now, that's kind of an interesting topic. What is anti-aging medicine? We're going to talk about how you can improve your health, how you can improve your lifespan. But if that doesn't do enough for you, let me just go over a few statistics with you. If that doesn't get you, say, okay, yeah, I want to do that. I want to pay attention, learn a little about what I can do in terms of anti-aging. So here's just some of the statistics. In 2012, about half of the adults in the United States, 117 million, had at least one chronic health condition. 1 in 4 had 2 or more health conditions. 7 of the top 10 causes of death in 2010 were related to chronic disease. And these diseases are such things as heart disease, cancer, diabetes, obesity, arthritis. There's a big price ticket to that, isn't there? There's a lot of things going on in terms of our healthcare system. And when we look at the gross domestic product, all the money that we produce in the United States, 16% of it goes to healthcare. United States in 2011, thanks. In 2011, we had a cost per person. Every person in the United States, healthcare expenditure was about $8,500 in 2011. 2008, it was $7,600. The closest nation has been Norway with about $5,000. There's a lot of money coming out there to take care of us. I believe we're in a health crisis. I believe we're going to develop into a health care crisis. And the answer to solving that health care crisis is going to be how we deal with our own health. I don't believe it's going to be technology coming up with a new pill or a new type of surgery, although they're very helpful and they're very beneficial. But considering the scope of the matter, I think that we have to come to terms that we need to take care of our own health. But the question is, how do we do that? What are the answers of taking care of our own selves? And how do we do it? So that's what we're going to talk to you about today. Does that sound okay? Okay. So let me ask you, how do we know what is good health? How do we know what we need to do for good health? There's a couple studies out there. There's a couple things. Have anybody ever heard of the blue zone? So the blue zones were just a group of researchers that went out and they found the places that had the people that were living the very longest. They looked at 5 different places. They looked in Italy, southern Italy. They looked at Loma Linda, the Seventh-day Adventists. They looked in Costa Rica. They looked at a place in Greece. And they looked at Okinawa. Found out that the people, the area that had the most the centurions rather, not the soldier centurion, although it was in Italy, was in Italy. And they had the most people that lived to 100 years old. They look at Okinawa, and they had the most people that lived over 80 years old. And what they did is they took this combination of groups together to decide or to look at their lifestyle, look at just what they were doing, and came up with the commonalities with what they were doing and how long they were living. So let me tell you what they came up with. They came up with family. They came up with no smoking, a plant-based diet, constant moderate physical activity, social engagement, and legumes. Legumes like beans and things like that. That's interesting, isn't it? Is that what you would put together as the most important things to live a long time? Some of them, huh? But how many of these things do we have control over? Every one of them, don't we? We're not talking genetics. We're not talking access to medical care. We're talking family. We're talking moderate, constant physical activity. We're talking don't smoke. We're talking social engagement and a plant-based diet. Interesting, isn't it? So what are some other studies that can give us some ideas? Well, we know back in the 50s, they did a lot of studies on hormones. They found that certain hormones improved your lifespan. DHEA, they found that the people that were living the longest and healthiest had elevated levels of DHEA, which is just a hormone. They find that people that have elevated levels as we get older, that maintain some levels of testosterone, they had better bone density, better brain function. They had better muscle support and better cognitive thinking. For women, they found that if you had elevated levels of estrogen or higher estrogen relative to other things, that you had, again, fewer cancers, less heart disease, you had better brain function, less macular degeneration. They find out that if you have low vitamin D, it's associated with more autoimmune conditions, including multiple sclerosis, heart disease, prostate cancer, breast cancer. So there's some interesting things about just what our levels of hormones in our function and even the vitamins that make a difference. And then more recently, there's been some studies of telomeres. Do you know what a telomere is? You do? Good. So let me tell you what a telomere is. A DNA, which is what your genetic code is, correct? That's your DNA. And they find that on the tail end of the DNA, there's a strand of repeating cycles. And that repeating cycle is the same cycle in every one of us. And that repeating cycle, the length of that repeating cycle, determines how long that cell will live in your body. See, when you have a cell, think about it, your gut lining cells are replaced every 2 or 3 days. And they figure that a cell can reproduce, can divide 50 times. That gives you about 200 to 300 days on your gut before you lose your gut. So that telomere is in relationship to something we call stem cells. Do you know what a stem cell is? So a stem cell, we understand that we have cells. When we were first conceived, there was one egg from the woman and one sperm from the man. And they came together with the chromosome, just half of each. And from that union, it was able to differentiate into a group of cells. We call it a blastosphere, and then it continued to differentiate and differentiate until it made you, with all the complexity of you, with your eyes being very different from your hands and very different from your stomach and very different from your heart. It all came from one cell, and that's genetic makeup that did that. So we have cells in our body that are kind of, they're an older cell line, and they're called stem cells. And what that stem cell has the capability of differentiating out into any other type of stem cell or any other type of cell that we have that we need in our body to continue to grow that tissue. Does that make sense? So when we run out of a certain type of a cell, it can't divide anymore, or we need more cells in an area, the stem cell is able to move into the area, and because of a complex set of instructions that we don't know about, we're starting to discover, there's a lot of research into stem cells, they can differentiate those stem cells into whatever type of a tissue we need. We're doing that in the wound center here. That when people used to have a wound, they're doing some stem cell replacement onto those wounds to allow that wound to heal much better. In my office, I do stem cells for joints to try to incorporate the body's ability to grow new cartilage and to regenerate cartilage into your joints so that we can see if we can return that function. Because as we know, arthritis is the number one reason for disability in our country. And not only does it take away your lifestyle and activity, but it takes away your income as well. So what they found with telomeres and telomerases is there are certain characteristics that allow, when you take a microscope, you take a cell out, you take the microscope and look at it and do some specific analysis of that DNA, you can see how long that telomere is. And when that telomere gets down to a certain length, it won't divide anymore. It becomes non-functional. And in fact, it becomes what they call senescent. And a senescent is it doesn't really die, it just kind of goes into hibernation. And as a result, it causes more inflammation at that point. So they figure that, geez, we can't do anything, we're just going to watch that. Then they started doing, that you're losing your stem cells, that's it. That's as long as that cell line can live. And then they started finding out that by doing certain activities or certain environments, that those stem cells those cells had the ability to lengthen out their telomeres. So we weren't confined that once the telomere gets short, that's it. We're able to lengthen those out. One of those things, stress shortens it. Sleep lengthens it. We can imagine that appropriate nutrition can help it, can't we? I mean, how important is nutrition? And then we also found that hormones, they have some mixed function on it. And exercise increases it. So with this combination of knowledge, knowing what blue zones are, what's important, look at their old research in terms of different characteristics of people that live longer and healthier and happier, and then looking at things such as the telomeres, we're coming to a better understanding of what can we truly do to improve our health. And what I've come up with to truly improve our health, I believe that we have to address what I call 5 pillars of health. Every one of us. We have to address our nutrition. Because after all, what you eat and drink is a substance of your life, isn't it? I mean, that's it. We can only process, we can only develop the hormones, only develop the structure in our body from the products that we bring into our body. If we're missing an ingredient, we're in trouble. It's like baking the cake and you just forgot the baking soda. Or however you make a cake. Probably said the wrong thing. It's working on a car and not adjusting the bolt. So those things, it just won't work as well. And so we want to give ourselves all the nutrition. But now in this country, we do have obesity, correct? You know, in the late 1960s, it had been steady for a very long time. 10%. The rate of obesity in the United States, 10%. Late 60s, it's progressed. I think it was in 2009 that we hit a landmark. 30% of our country is obese, and 30% of our country is overweight. And that doesn't only affect us, that affects the kids. Because in the kids, it's amazing, I think 1/5 of all children to the 15 are obese. But are those people healthy? See, I believe that our weight doesn't have any reflection as to whether we have the appropriate nutrition in our body. I believe that we're still suffering from malnutrition. We just have too much weight. So when I talk about nutrition, we're going to go over an example in a minute about how I look at nutrition and what's important to you. But the nutrients that you get in your body are extremely important. And on this Okinawa study, they talked about a plant-based diet, whereas you might have heard about the Paleo Diet. And what is the Paleo Diet? Well, mainly it is a plant-based. See, you kind of stole my thunder. But Paleo Diet is always considered meat. You know what the caveman did. They went and clubbed something on the head, they ate it. But they don't include legumes. And the reason they don't include legumes is because legumes actually have some products in them that they actually rob yourself of nutrients when you eat them, unless you're cooked, unless you soak them. So, nutrition is important. But if you had all the nutrients in the world, if you lived in the Garden of Eden, and your body couldn't absorb those nutrients, then what? Doesn't really matter, does it? And so that's where we're talking about gut function. So our gut function starts from the mouth and goes all the way down until it goes into the toilet. Everything in there. When we start to chew foods, now, how many believe that broccoli is good for you? You know those chemicals in broccoli, you know what makes them good? Is that you mix them. You hear the benefits of garlic, right? If you don't crush your garlic and let it sit for about 10 minutes, you don't get the health benefits of garlic. Because that garlic, those ingredients are compartmentalized. And when you crush it, it allows those ingredients to come together, and now they start to give you the full benefit. When you're chewing food, what are you doing? You're smashing it. You're beating it up. You're bringing that food together. So just the process of chewing food is important. When the food goes into your stomach, what should it do? It should get sterilized because our stomach needs acid. I mean, it has a pH of 1 to 2, and it should sterilize all the stuff, all the bacteria that's getting to your body to protect you. Correct? And if you don't have any acid in your stomach, what don't you make? Vitamin B12. So it's important to have an acid functioning in our stomach. And once that mixes up, not only that, but the acid helps break down proteins. So when that acid gets onto that, it starts to break down the proteins, and then it starts to shoot it out into the small intestines, into the duodenum rather, and the first part of the small intestine, and then you buffer the acid, and you add the bile, and you add the other enzymes that start to break down all the other nutrients that go through our intestinal system. And as that food is going through your intestinal system, that lining between the intestines and your bloodstream is 1 cell thick. So can you imagine if you had inflammation there or irritation in there, how you could maybe leak some things that you don't want to leak to into your system? That's one of the considerations, possible consideration for autoimmune. Possible. But it's put out there by, again, a physician named Alessio Fasano, who's at Harvard Research. And he has come out with that we have some markers in our intestines that when the food gets into the intestine and some of these markers get elevated, it tells us that we have what is called a leaky gut. And that leaky gut allows certain things to migrate through that intestine into your body, and it's possibly a reason why we might get autoimmune conditions. So one of the reasons that we have to have a well-lined gut function is because of that pathway. But then the food gets into our colon. And what does our colon have? Well, our colon is just full of bacteria. But the recent research in Scientific American, I just got out on my desk, and they're talking Alzheimer's and the relationship to Alzheimer's to gut microbiota. To the bacteria in your gut. There's been research talking about changing the bacteria flora in your gut can help decrease arthritis. Changing the gut bacteria can promote or decrease some of the other medical conditions we have. So there's a lot out there, and what we want to do is make sure that it's as healthy as we possibly can. Now, the second part of that is detoxification, and that's not a special thing. Detoxification is not the idea that you're doing an enema or anything like that. Detoxification is what your liver does. When you have a food that comes into your body, your liver processes that food. That's why all of the blood that comes from your intestine has to go to the liver first. Did you know that? The difference is if you put something on your skin, that bypasses the liver. So if you're putting a face cream on that might have some toxicants, it will bypass the liver and get into your system. So the liver acts as an organ that helps detoxify things. And we have something called phase 1 detoxification and something called phase 2 detoxification. And you can imagine that phase 2 detoxification is very important in terms of proteins and sulfur groups from your vegetables. And if you don't have that, you can't eliminate those toxins out of your body. And it's estimated that about 2,000 new chemicals are developed in the United States a year. And those don't have to go through any special studies, they're just developed. Okay? So it's important to address our gut function and address our detoxification systems. And then we also want to balance our hormones. We just want our hormones working right. If you have one hormone way over here out of the way and you got another hormone over here and it's trying to compensate for it, we're not going to be as healthy as we should. Does that make sense? So our hormones, let's just talk about a few of them. Anybody heard of the thyroid hormone? Okay. So the thyroid hormone, the thyroid makes a hormone called T4. I'll just say the name T4. But do you know what your cell uses? T3. So your body has to convert the T4 to T3 before you even get any real benefit out of it. Let's look at estrogen, and testosterone, and DHA, and cortisol. Those are all hormones, right? Well, those hormones, you know where they come from? Cholesterol. Every one of them is made from cholesterol. And we think that there's a pathway because the number one hormone that you have to have or you will die will be cortisol. So it will sacrifice what your estrogen level is and what your testosterone level and what your DHEA level is. It'll sacrifice all of those to make cortisol. Because cortisol is absolutely necessary for survival. And then they interact. Because if you have a malfunction of your cortisol, if your cortisol is too high, it automatically decreases the ability for your body to convert the T4 to T3. When your cortisol is high, you know where it goes? You know the part of your brain that's most active for cortisol? Do you know? You were going to say?
Oh, no.
Oh.
That if you have too much, it's harder to sleep.
Yeah, very good. So your cortisol, actually, there's a part of your brain called the hippocampus. And that hippocampus is responsible for memory. So, for instance, you have a stressful event that happens. You're walking in the jungle, and you're looking around, and you don't know where that jaguar is. And you're smelling something that's a little different, and you're hearing something a little different, and then it jumps out, and you survive. The hippocampus and the amygdala, the part of the brain that really interacts for stressful situations, works together, and that hippocampus is able to form a short-term memory, and it's accentuated by your cortisol. That is if we're doing things right. But what happens if you keep your cortisol high? With stress and anxiety. You know what happens to your hippocampus? It starts to shrink. We start to lose our short-term memory because it's trying to protect itself, and it shrinks away. So balancing our hormones is not only important in terms of just how we feel, but it's important for our memory. It's important for our thyroid function. It's important for our skin. It's important for our bone density. It's important for our brain. It's important for so many functions we have in our body. And they're all balanced. So when one's out of balance, it's going to shift the other ones. Does that make some sense? Exercise. There is a hormone that's kind of an interesting hormone. That hormone is called brain-derived neural growth factor. It's BDNF. That hormone is stimulated by exercise. In the brain, that hormone makes connections happen. If you're concerned about losing your mind and not doing things, exercise. Exercise is the one thing that can stimulate that hormone to work and make better connections, to make our brains work better and active and keep them healthy. That's one of the benefits of exercise. But what are some of the other benefits of exercise? Lifting weights increases your testosterone. Exercise increases your bone density. Exercise decreases your response to adrenaline. And adrenaline is what gives you that anxious feeling, that anxiety that goes on. Adrenaline is what raises your sympathetic nervous system. So you got a pitter-patter of the heart. It makes everything a little more irritable, including your heart, so you can go into an arrhythmia and then have a problem. Exercise rebalances us. And then the last one is stress. So stress is ubiquitous. And I'm not just talking emotional stress. I'm talking physical stress. I'm talking chemical stress. I'm talking toxin stress. Every one of these things in our body adapts to stress. We have to have some stress. If I'm lifting a weight, I'm stressing my muscles. I'm going to get those muscles stronger. And that's because I'm applying stress. But if I just kept doing it every day, I would start to become weaker. Your bones require stress. That's why you need to exercise and be up and walking. You know, the astronauts that were up in the space lab, they found that they had such severe osteopenia, they never knew that they would ever get it back, or osteoporosis. because they didn't have any gravity. And so the United States limited how long they would allow them to stay up there because they were so concerned that it was going to cause a problem, that they would never get it back. Stress makes our heart do better, as long as it's stopped. So who wrote that book about zebras? Have you heard of that book? Yeah, it's a zebra book. The idea on that zebra book was that if you look at a zebra in the Serengeti, and that zebra and the lion comes up and it's chasing all the zebras, and the zebras are running for their life along with the wildebeest and everything else, and then a lion gets one of them. And the lions are over there and they're eating on this zebra. And then all the other zebras now are back to eating and back to relaxing, because they know that those lions have done what they're going to do. They're going to be not running after me, and I have hours to eat in the perfect calm now after the storm. But how many of us do that? Most of us no. Most of us get anxious about something, and when that problem is solved, we have to find something else to be anxious about. And then we're anxious about that, and we continue to drive this stress response. And so our body never really adapts. And so our cortisol becomes chronically elevated, and we start to lose some of the other hormone function, and we start to lose our memory, and we start to have impaired sleep. So what's the opposite of stress? It's generally sleep. Sleep. When we should be relaxed. And the hormones that are present there when you're stressed is cortisol. And the hormone that is present when you're sleeping is melatonin. So, we need to have that sleep. Did you know that if you don't sleep 8 hours a night, let's say if you sleep 6 hours a night, that your all-cause mortality is increased? You know, if you just sleep 8 hours a night, you'll probably lose some weight. Because when you don't sleep, you're walking around and you're trying to do what you normally do, what the expectations of you are, and you start eating more food. Because when you eat food, that sudden blast of sugar kind of wakes you up for a short period of time. And so we start to gain weight. But the problem with waking up for a short period of time with that sugar is it starts to change our insulin. You know how much sugar you generally have in your body at one time? That you should have in your body at one time. You know those little packets of sugar when you get some tea or coffee? That's it. That's about it. Now, every study, somebody could probably present another study that's maybe a little different and maybe a different opinion, but I'm going to present my studies. There was a study done at Kaiser Medical Center some time ago, not too long ago, where they took a large population and they looked at their fasting blood sugars, and they found that for every person that had a fasting blood sugar over 84, for every point over 84, there was a 6% chance of developing diabetes within the next 10 years. That meant by time you were 94, which is below what we ever worry about, you were at a 60% chance of developing diabetes within 10 years. Pretty high. And what does diabetes do? Number one cause of amputation, number one cause of adult blindness, increases cardiovascular disease. That's hormones. That's related to our nutrition. That's related to our exercise, because when we exercise, it changes that dynamic, and that's related to our hormones. Does that make sense? So, I'm just going to give you an example of what we do at Fresh Start Health and Wellness. I'm going to give you an example of a person and how I would apply all of these together. So let's say I have a person that is tired, brain fog, fatigue. They've gained weight and they're having a hard time losing weight. Their joints hurt. Every time they eat, they kind of feel bloated. Can you associate with any of these symptoms? So how do we treat that? Using these 5 pillars of health. You remember the 5 pillars of health, the neat thing is these are all things that you do. Nobody has a patent on this. This is just living life. So for that person, the very first thing that I would probably do, if they have some GI problems and they're having some bloating sensation and they're tired and fatigued, a lot of those symptoms sound like they could be a thyroid problem. But when you're tired and fatigued, it could be that you're anemic. Or when you're tired and fatigued, you may not be getting sleep. But the first thing I do, if I'm looking at nutrition, we're going to look at the nutrition. We're going to say, okay, what are you eating? Are you eating enough vegetables? Is it a plant-based diet? Now, some people say that you don't need vitamins, and I agree, you don't need vitamins. But how many of you are eating 9 servings of vegetables a day? When you're eating 9 servings of vegetables a day, I say you don't need vitamins. But you probably still need some CoQ10, unless you're eating organ meat. So we work with the diet, we work with the food, and the first thing I'm going to do is probably take her off a lot of foods, her or him off of a lot of food. I'm going to restrict those foods. I'm going to take those foods that we know have more reactions than somebody else. And we're not talking an allergic reaction. We're just talking a sensitivity. You know, when you get stung, when you eat shellfish and your throat puffs up and you can't breathe and somebody has to stick you with the EpiPen, that's an allergic reaction. When you eat something and you get a little flush and you feel a little uncomfortable, that's a sensitivity. But we'll take away those foods that seem to be associated with more sensitivities. And why am I doing that? Because I want to calm down the gut. I want to find out if any of those foods are irritating the gut. And then I'm probably going to give them maybe some supplements, nutritional supplements, real food, that's going to help and support the detoxification processes in the body. So we're going to make sure they get the ingredients that make glutathione and the ingredients that make sulfurination, that do sulfur products, and the ingredients of the proteins to do that. So we can kind of settle that problem. We're going to probably do some lab tests. We're going to check their blood tests, make sure they're not anemic. We might check a homocysteine level, because a homocysteine level might tell me that they have a genetic defect for something we call MTHFR, which means that they don't have the capability of methylating, which is a detoxification pathway in their body. There's other ways of doing it, but it could mean that they're a little more susceptible to something. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to check maybe their thyroid, but not just a TSH. We want to see what their free T3 is doing, and we want to see what their reverse T3. Because our body is so, it's like the space shuttle. There are so many backup systems to work and something to shut it off if you're not doing well. So if somebody had a thyroid problem and they still feel fatigued and they don't have the energy and their hair's still falling out, their skin is still dry, they're still very cold, and the TSH is normal, well, it could be that the TSH is normal, but what is the free T3 doing? And what is the reverse T3 doing? Because your body has a system to say that we will make the hormone that goes into your body and stirs everything up, but I don't want to make it go up if the rocket ship's going to fall apart. It says, get your body healthy before I turn the engines on. So we want to start with the nutrition, but we want to know the factors that we're going to have to work with and how to balance those hormones. Does that make sense? And then we're going to look at let's look at your insulin. If I'm going to put somebody on a nutritional program, which is not a diet, a nutritional program is using your nutrients. A diet is taking them away. So a nutritional program that I give you and make sure that you have all the nutrients, that's what you want to think about when you're eating. And if you wanted to lose weight or if you want to get some, you look at what I'm providing to me, and I'm going to eat the most nutritionally high, balanced foods I can. And think about it. I mean, when you're eating vegetables that have incredible nutritional value, you're not going to get many calories out of that. You can eat a boatload of those until you eat a little sugar, right? So you want to get the nutritional factors that are in there to help balance your hormones, and then you're going to exercise. And there's a variety of exercises. We recommend, generally, most people, the recommendation out there for exercise, and exercise to help with your brain, is that you're going to exercise maybe 40 minutes 3 times a week. Or you can do what is called high-intensity exercise. And if you haven't been exercising, you need to be able to walk 40 minutes on a continuous basis before you start to do any more strenuous exercise. Or you have to be cleared by your doctor of their heart. And then the last thing is, how do we deal with stress? How do we know if you have an elevated stress level? Anybody have an idea?
Would you measure the cortisol?
We could. We could measure the cortisol. But there's another way we can do it, and that's just looking at your heart rate. What we look at is rate-to-rate variability. We know that when the sympathetic system is activated, that your heart rate variability goes down. Between each beat of the heart, there's a tiny bit of variability. And as we get more stress, that variability decreases. And the more variability, we're not talking arrhythmia, we're talking just a very small rate there. And we utilize that to train somebody. Have you ever heard of the athletes in the zone? So you might hear like the quarterback, and he said, everything slowed down. I'm seeing this, I wait for that to happen, and we're watching it happens just seconds. And that's because they're in the zone. Even though their heart rate's going, they're excited about it, they're able to calm their sympathetic nervous system down. And our sympathetic nervous system makes us focus right on that one topic and doesn't let us look at the whole screen. And they can relax. So athletes do it, and we can utilize that as well. So it's called heart rate variability. And we can utilize that testing as well as some other physiologic testing to see where we are in terms of dealing with stress, and then train somebody so that they know how to calm themselves when in those situations. So by doing that, for this person that has those symptoms, we'll work on the detoxification. On the hormone balance, we're going to have to look at the labs. We're going to have to look at the nutrients that you're getting. And some of the nutrients that are important for your thyroid are going to be your selenium and your zinc and your B vitamins. You know, it's been shown in a Chinese study that if you have thyroid and you don't have adequate zinc, it increases the inflammation in your thyroid gland. And so when they added zinc, it decreased. Selenium. Selenium, Brazil nuts. So we look at cortisol. What is the reason that we might go into something that we call reverse T3? Well, when you're on a protein deficient diet, you don't get enough protein. You have inflammation in your diet. You're overstressed. It's going to shed your body to the point that you're going to switch your hormone production so it deactivates your thyroid even though you're making it. And then we have to work on the stress issues. We have to make the person get to sleep. We have to make sure if they're gaining weight, what's the timing of their food? So if somebody has an elevated insulin level, you cannot burn fat. Your insulin, when you have a little sugar load, your insulin will go up, take that sugar, and put it into a cell. Sugar only does two things. It makes fat, or it makes energy. That's all sugar does. So it takes that and it puts it into fat. And if your sugar level has been up for too long a period of time, your insulin level becomes elevated. And when that insulin level is elevated, we start calling it insulin resistance. Have you heard of that? So that means it takes more insulin to lower your sugar level. Do you know what hemoglobin A1C is? Hemoglobin A1C is your hemoglobin and how much of it has sugar attached to it. It's like making creme brulee. You put the sugar on it and just meld it on it. It's hemoglobin, how much hemoglobin has been glycated, that you had that much sugar in your body that hooked onto a protein and messed up with the protein so that hemoglobin doesn't really work. And the same thing happens with your eyes. And the same thing happens with your nerves. So over time, we add that sugar. And so sugar in our body is something we really don't want to have. That's what the insulin does. But the problem is after you've eaten and your insulin level remains high, then at that point, you're saying, wow, I'm hungry. And we used to have a term called the dropsies, where a person, their sugar would drop and they would just fall on the ground. And we think maybe that was because they didn't have the ability to make cortisol. Because if your body, your insulin will not let you burn fat for energy, your cortisol kicks in and it burns your muscle. And that could be one of the reasons that you wake up at 3 or 4 in the morning. Because we're not used to burning our fat. And so we run out of our sugar stores, or our insulin is being up a little high, and we're not used to running at a lower sugar. See, if you've been running at a high sugar, dropping to a lower sugar, you're going to feel lousy. It's a process of changing the energy patterns. But if you drop down quickly, or if you lower and your cortisol gets elevated, that's going to combat the melatonin, wake you up, and then we're going to not get our 8 hours of sleep, not get our rest, not get our detoxification, because most of the detoxification occurs at night when you're sleeping, when you're not eating. Does that make sense? So let me have you all just ask questions of me.
I have one.
You've been, I'll stand up. Hi, I'm Dawn Sturman. I teach at Bozeman High School. Anyway, I was diagnosed by a gastroenterologist here at Bozeman Deaconess about 10 years ago with fructose malabsorption. Have you heard of that?
No.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that a lot of people haven't, and this gastroenterologist said that it's something that will affect a lot of people of European descent, where we have in our gut the inability to digest foods that have a higher fructose to glucose ratio. And so ever since he told me that, I feel so much better. And so when you said gut function, you know, and he said, just go look it up on Wikipedia, but you can do a simple hydrogen breath test. Mm-hmm. And I feel like it's amazing. I've been diagnosed with irritable bowel syndrome. And then when Dr. Schoenfeld said, do you know you have fructose malabsorption? I was like, no. And he said, well, this is what you need to do. And if you want more, look it up. And it's just like a totally different person. So I thought it was interesting that you were talking about the sugars and sensitivities.
So does that mean you've taken away fructose out of your diet?
Not totally, just as long as the fructose to glucose ratio is less than 1.
Yeah.
Okay.
Fructose is an interesting sugar. Fructose doesn't necessarily raise your sugar, but it does affect your liver. It seems
Yeah,
to have
so-
more problems with the liver than other things. But
Okay.
in our society now, with high fructose corn syrup and
Mm-hmm.
all of those things, it's supposed to be healthy. I think you're in a good place.
In-
I think you're in a good place to avoid most fructoses.
Oh, yeah, I do. And there's a whole list, and there's a whole group of people who do this. And you can look it up on Wikipedia if any of you are always constantly bloated, but you can't do anything like pitted fruits, gluten, and broccoli, unfortunately. I mostly eat paleo because I also do CrossFit, and it's the only thing that really, really works for me. And anyway, I just thought I'd mention that because I didn't know if you tested people for fructose malabsorption as well.
What we,
Anyway,
a
thank
lot
you.
of the things, no, thank you. A lot of times, and she's just an example of an individual that people might look at something and say, oh, you're crazy. Nothing's wrong with you. You know, just get over it. And you really have something that we've been able to diagnose. But there's a lot of conditions out there that we don't have a lot of literature to help in supporting it. So I'll find people that might have, I have people that have had GI distress and they're on antacids and Prilosec and omeprazole, the whole gamut, and they're always popping the Tums on a routine basis. And we put them through a food elimination diet and help with this just supporting the detoxification system, and it's gone. It's finished. Others need a little more work. Yep, it's just doing the same thing. And if you're helping them with that process, and it's just, again, some of it's trial and error. But the bottom line is everything there is something that you can do. And really the idea about, or the comment, or my recommendation, my suggestion is, you know, doing these things is not, it's complicated out there sometimes because we have so much misinformation. The information we're talking about is pretty sound in terms of medical support. Now, you have to look at that medical support. I mean, it's in the New England Journal of Medicine, it's in those things, but a lot of those things are just kind of, are not addressed because it's not directly pertaining to what we do on a routine basis. But we have a lot of support in the literature, and then there's a lot of goofy stuff out there. And the hard thing is to come together and find the stuff that really makes some sense and what makes the sense for you, because you're a unique individual. So it's not hard to do, but the bottom line is you do have to get it right, or you're not going to feel as good as you could. And that's why I've developed this as a medically supervised program to try to bring that science together, try to help people that want to take that next step. And it's not something that you just come in, it's an educational process. I've tried so much to just talk to somebody and say, okay, I want you to do this, and then they leave, and I say, well, did you do it? And says, oh no, I didn't think about it. And I says, okay, well, that was a waste of 20 minutes of my time explaining to them why they should do something like that. I'm gonna build it and let them come, you know, as opposed to going out. So if somebody needed that information, but my advice to anybody is to start doing it. Don't wait and don't delay. Start now. Because there is a time that it is too late. There is a time that you can't repair yourself. The damage may be too far. But there's always a chance of improving yourself. So don't wait until it's too late. Start doing it now. And make the decision that you're going to take control of your destiny by taking control of your health. Because we always talk to financial advisors about where we want to be. How much money do I need when I'm retired? Well, talk to your medical advisor. Come in and say, this is where I want to be, this is where I am now, this is where I want to be, this is how long I plan to live. Can you help me figure out a plan how to get there? Because they're your advisor. Okay? Yes?
Probiotics, prebiotics, could you comment on that?
Yeah, I think probiotics are great. What we're finding that some of those studies, there's some very specialized probiotics that have been found to alter different diseases. There's a couple that are made in Germany. They're fairly expensive. But a probiotic is kind of a placeholder. It's something I think is very important. You put that probiotic, and probiotic is, for instance, if you've ever been on antibiotics, and antibiotics kill everything in your colon, and then you want to start adding some probiotics to help build that up. And so adding a probiotic, I think, is an excellent way to do it. The other way of doing it is fermented foods. So in my program, we teach people how to do fermented vegetables. We teach them how to make water kefir or milk kefir if they can tolerate dairy. We teach them how to make kombucha. So now they have some of these additional probiotics. Now, prebiotic is very good. It's a fiber. What you're trying to do is give a substance that helps the bacteria grow. And one of the reasons that you need to have a healthy bacteria, and one of the reasons it's important about the food that you feed the bacteria, is because the food that you feed the bacteria make chemicals that nourish the enterocytes, the cells lining your intestine. And so for the small intestine, glutathione becomes very important, and for the butane for the large intestine. But there are some conditions. If somebody has small intestinal bacterial overgrowth or some other things, we may not give a prebiotic for that. But your food is considered, in general, a prebiotic. What you're feeding the bacteria. Does that make sense? So if it's high sugar, it's going to do something. You know, by the way, I believe that if we're doing a lot of belching or we're having abdominal discomfort or we're passing a lot of gas, it's not healthy. Something's wrong. That's my thought. Anything else? Yes, sir.
Yeah, I was curious, what's your thoughts on the idea of dietary supplements for cartilage repair? We hear about the glucosamine, the chondroitin, and then you mentioned earlier the stem cell approach to repairing cartilage.
Okay. So in terms of cartilage repair, there's been studies before on glucosamine versus chondroitin sulfate for a cartilage repair process. And on the chondroitin and glucosamine, the literature's been up and down. Some people think it's really the glucosamine, it's not the chondroitin sulfate that makes the difference. And some people say that 50% of the people improve, and some people say that 50% of people don't. It's cheap, do it. As far as collagen to repair, I think, again, we're all unique in our genetics. It's kind of interesting, why do some people, you look at them and their cartilage just is shot? And they haven't really done much more than somebody else, and somebody else's cartilage is pretty robust. So my belief is that cross-linking, it's a genetic aspect, that cartilage probably doesn't hold up as well according to the different forces that apply to it. So everything that I can do to help support them, there are some specific collagens that have research, and that's the one that I carry in my office, that have research that just that type of collagen, they've gone through the process of research, and they show that there's been a 30% improvement in symptoms, decreased pain, using that collagen versus other ones. And if you take 1 capsule a day, it's good for your skin, and 2 capsules a day, it's good for your joints, because the collagen. So I believe in collagen support is helpful. Now, when I do a stem cell injection, and the concepts of stem cell is this, and right now I'm doing joints. And there's a lot of literature out there about doing them for other things, the heart, the liver, diabetes, and a variety of things. There's a lot of research out there. Every day, if you just Google stem cell research, but go to PubMed, which is all the medical publications and research that'll tell you. So my condition or my aspiration for stem cell is this. We have people that lose their joint cartilage for whatever reason. It may be an athlete that has been playing and then they've got what is called an osteochondral defect. And one way of repairing that is taking cartilage from another part of your body, sacrificing that cartilage and transplanting it into your knee and putting those that cartilage flap in there and trying to make it as smooth as you can to let it grow. There's techniques that have been done called microfracture, where you go in and drill holes in there and let that tissue, the blood, come up. What I look at it is that stem cells have this capability of turning into any other. We're using a mesenchymal stem cell. Mesenchymal stem cells we can get from adipose tissue, and we can also get them from bone marrow. We actually have more mesenchymal stem cells in our adipose tissue than we do in our bone marrow. When we take that mesenchymal stem cells and we separate the other structures out of there, and we don't just take the stem cells, we take the cell structure around it. Because what we don't know, what we're finding is that stem cell sits in that area, and where it sits is right next to the blood vessels. That's where stem cells hang out. And as that stem cell is hanging out there, there's some kind of a chemical cellular mechanism that either turns it on or keeps it dormant. And we're not smart enough yet to know what those are. We know that injury has an effect, and we know that your platelets, when you have an injury, your platelets release something called growth factors, a variety of growth factors. And those growth factors stimulate stem cells to move into the area to heal. So when you break your bone, on that bone, you're going to develop a callus or a clot around that bone. And that stimulates the rest of your cells to migrate in there, to start to clean up the broken bone, and to start to lay down matrix for the bone. And it brings stem cells into that area to start to make bone. That's what we believe happens. The problem with joints is there's no blood in your joint. We don't have blood in our joint. It's an avascular structure. So the only way I can get stem cells into the joint is put them there. So we will take the stem cells, we will put them there, and then we add growth factors from your platelets to stimulate the growth of those cells. And then we provide collagen, supportive collagen, and we make sure that we're supporting it with minerals and vitamins the best that we can, that we think of, that support that. Because we know that the oxidation process in joints, bad joints, we've seen that vitamin C has an effect on it. So should we just put more vitamin C in, or should we just get your body with vitamin C? So that's the one thing that we do. But everybody, just take your fist, put it on your other hand, and I want you to just roll that fist back and forth. Just roll it. Now that is going to last forever. That joint, no problem. But now hold that fist there, and instead of rolling it, slide it back and forth. Just back and forth like that. Put pressure on it. You see how it's pulling that tissue? See how it's rubbing on that, it's pulling that collagen? That's, in my opinion, is arthritis. Because when we look at a knee and we look at the side of the knee, we see all these bony spurs on the side of the knee. And what that is we get a wobble. I call it a wobble. I just have you stand on one leg, and if you're doing this, you've got bad knees. If you're standing there, you need to lock it down. So when I'm looking at stem cells, it's not just putting the stem cells in to try to grow or differentiate into collagen cells, which then make the collagen. I have to stop the wearing down. If you're wearing them out faster than I'm making them, we're not going to get there. So it always comes with the exercise program. How do I strengthen it? How do I need to improve the flexibility, because the joints get their nutrition by a compression and a relaxation. Compression and relaxation. So if we don't get any compression and we don't get any relaxation. In the 1970s, they did the studies. That's where they came out with those CPMs, that a joint didn't get any compression, they both degenerated. So it needs activity. It needs movement. So the concept of putting stem cells there is to try to grow some cartilage. Now the cartilage is like looking at that night sky. So you look at that night sky and you see all those stars. That's the sail. And all that black is the collagen. It's the cartilage that the sail makes. So if you lose your stars, you lose your collagen. And it gets thinner and thinner. And when it gets thinner and thinner, that's kind of like putting your pressure on your bone versus putting the pressure on the thumb. Feels a lot better here than when I'm putting the pressure right on the bone. And so that bone, that pressure onto, when you're standing on it, that pressure, if I build my collagen up, I build my cartilage up, I'm more comfortable. But it doesn't, on the other end, it doesn't matter whether you're walking on a very slick, thin layer of ice or a 2 feet thick of ice, you'll still slip. And that's your collagen. So if you can bend your knee, if you can do this and it's not killing you, you still have something there. But you can lose it. And so what we try to do is replace it as soon as we can so that we have a thicker amount. And then we work with them in terms of their nutrition, and we look at other things. I look at them, maybe they might have, I look at if they have a gluten sensitivity that causes inflammation in their body or whatever else they have in their body. We try to help support their system so it doesn't cause inflammation and break it down. So I think collagen is good. I think glucosamine is good. I think all of those things are good. But you also have to do the exercises. You have to strengthen that knee so that when you take that step, you're not wobbling. And it's a simple exercise, but if anybody's ever seen me, my number of repetitions has never been 3 sets of 10. It's like 250 repetitions. A count of 300. 5 minutes of stomach exercises. Because I believe you want what I want for you, which is to be healthy and be able to do whatever you want in life, not limited by your body. Does that make sense?
It does. I was also curious about what percentage of people respond positively to the stem cell. Is it an actual implant that you're performing?
No.
Or a transplant?
It is. It's a transplant in a sense.
And then what is the success rate for that?
Well, we've only been doing it just over a year, and there's one person that it hasn't worked on. But that doesn't mean that they're back to doing everything in the world. But the 2 people that I just saw today, I asked them how they were doing, and we were looking at advancing their exercises. And she says, geez, I can now go up and down stairs. I'm going up the bleachers. I couldn't go downstairs. I have to be a little careful when I'm going downstairs yet. So far it's good. Now, how long that lasts out there, I think depends on a variety of things. How well somebody keeps up with their activities, how well they keep up with the lifestyle that they have to do. And the bottom line with stem cells, you can always do it again. It's not something that once you have done it, you can never do it again. So I think total joint replacements are an excellent choice for people. we know what they will do in the future. But there are complications that can happen with them as well. And in my experience, total hips are much better than total knees. They start to get unstable. And this is just my experience. So this is just the people that I see. Some people are good, but after 3 or 4 years or 5 years, those joints are just slipping. And I can't do anything for them. I mean, we could maybe do what we call PRP injections to try to support and strengthen the ligaments and get the ligament to tighten up. And we can do those kind of things. But it's not, and I'm just trying to be really frank because I don't ever want to say that it's this panacea, you're all going to get better, everybody's going to do good. But so far, I'm really pleased with the results that we've had so far. And it's been working pretty good.
Thank you.
Yes.
Going back to the nutrition, you talked about limiting sugar and how dangerous that is to get an elevated insulin level and insulin sensitivity and all that. How does drinking alcohol go into that mix of nutrition?
Well, alcohol is a sugar, and the probably one of the most difficult things with alcohol is the effect that it does onto the liver. You know, we used to have fatty liver used to be so much related to alcohol. And now we've replaced it, and it's called non-alcoholic fatty liver, steatosis. So our weight has caused more liver cirrhosis now than alcohol. What alcohol does in some people, this detoxification and the individuality of people, I think it's the enzyme 1B6 or 2D6 or 2E6, if I remember right, that if somebody has what we call a genetic SNP, which just means that we're all a little different. And if they have that, if they drink alcohol, they really run into trouble. And then if they add acetaminophen, it causes a problem. But alcohol is considered a sugar. But if we're drinking as much alcohol as we are thinking that what we're doing with sugar, you're drinking a soft drink, then you will have liver failure. Because, you know, we drink so many soft drinks.